The Grass is Always Greener, Chapter 10. Lloyd couldn't help but giggle to himself as he sat waiting. He had to time this just right for the maximum effect. It was always disorienting to wake up in an unfamiliar place, especially since he had been kidnapped so often in the past. But the lack of cage and restraints was comforting as he slowly reoriented himself. Kai, he had decided to drop calling him Mother, was a big help when he had woken up gasping and looking around frantically, not fully seeing the Fire Ninja's bedroom for what it was, only that it was not the ninja's cramped apartment or the bounty. He had rubbed Lloyd's back and spoke soothingly to him until he calmed down, gave him his phone to play with, and even offered to get started on a pancake breakfast just for him. Needless to say, if he already hadn't the night before, Lloyd definitely liked him now. Not as much as his own Kai, but he was a pretty close second. Anyway, while pancakes were nice, there was really only one way to fully bounce back from a bad morning, and Lloyd was all set to do just that. Finally determining he'd waited long enough, Lloyd reached out to flick a switch in the circuit breaker. Immediately, a shriek filled the apartment as Nia's morning shower suddenly turned ice cold. Stifling his laughter with his hands, Lloyd quickly scrambled away. Stuck in another dimension or not, this was going to be a fun day. Nia, dripping wet and furious, was standing before her brother in nothing but a towel and glowering at the little squirt hiding behind him, turning her own element against her. Jay had been right the day before. He was a gremlin. Said gremlin was looking up at the twins, the picture of wide-eyed innocence. "I just thought it was the light switch," he said. "I didn't mean to do it." "Oh, yeah, right," Nia scoffed as she tried to pull water from her still wet and soapy hair to splash on top of his head. Before she could manage it, Kai, who had been pulled away from cooking for this, quickly blocked her. "Lay off, Nia. He said it was an accident. He's just a kid who's lost and scared. Have a heart, okay?" Nia didn't think the kid looked particularly lost or scared as he stuck his tongue out at her from behind her twin's back. Seeing she was not backing down, Kai sighed and said, "Look, I'll turn the hot water back on and you finish your shower. You'll feel better after breakfast. Dad should be finishing it up soon anyway." He then turned and headed for the circuit breaker, leaving Nia and Lloyd alone in the hallway. Nia glared down at the munchkin, and he glared back with as much defiance as he could muster. She did not recall the Lloyd she knew being this much trouble at that age. "Well, two could play this game. My vengeance will be swift and merciless," said Nia, making an "I've got my eye on you" gesture. "Count on it." "Bring it on," Lloyd said, puffing out his chest. Nia then left to finish her shower, and Lloyd made his way into the kitchen and dining area of the apartment, joining the siblings' mother at the table as their father finished the pancakes. Maya, their mother, looked up from a newspaper she was reading by an open window and greeted him warmly, and Ray called over how much longer breakfast would be. They had both proven to be perfectly friendly people who welcomed him to their home with open arms, if not a good few questions about his identity. They had accepted the strange explanation nonetheless. He didn't have the heart to tell the siblings or their parents that in his world the two adults had been missing since Nia was 3, and Kai had to grow up far too quickly to care for her in their absence. Their presence here really went a long way to explaining why this Kai was far more open and trusting than his own. Nia and Kai came in not too long after, and Lloyd knew from the moment Nia walked in she'd already thought of her revenge plan. "You know," she said conversationally to him over the pancakes moments later, "you really need some new clothes." Lloyd glanced down at his green ninja gi. The gi had always been several sizes too big with the intention of him growing into it. But he could see what Nia was getting at. His clothes were a mess, being streaked with soot and still smelling of smoke from the day before. Ray rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Do we still have any of the kids' old clothes he could use?" he asked his wife. "None of Kai's," said Maya. "He ruined all his clothes at that age. Too much adventure for them to handle." Kai looked sheepish at that. Lloyd could see where this was going, and he could only watch as Nia smirked and said in a falsely helpful tone, "I know where you keep some of my old stuff. I'm sure I could find something that would fit him." Lloyd stared at her, horrified. "That's very nice of you, Nia," said Maya, not realizing what she was doing. "You go get some, and I'll put his clothes in the wash." Lloyd watched as Nia finished her pancakes and flounced away, his mind racing as he tried to think of a way out of this. While his Nia wasn't the girliest girl out there, and he would bet the same held true for this one, he had no doubt she was going to find him the most feminine thing she ever owned and force him to wear it whether he liked it or not. When Nia came back carrying a pink shirt with glittery butterflies and bright yellow shorts, saying she was sorry but they were the only things she could find in his size, he was ready. Pretending to graciously accept the clothes, Lloyd started to walk towards the bathroom with them in his arms, only to conveniently trip on the rolled-up two long legs of his gi. He made a great show of flailing his arms to get his balance before falling flat on the floor. The clothes, however, went flying straight out the open window. The family and Lloyd crowded around the window, and to Lloyd's delight, the shirt and shorts had landed smack dab in the middle of a mud puddle, making them even messier than the ones he was wearing now. And they were the only ones Nia had available, so she couldn't try again. Seeing she couldn't go back on her bluff, Nia glowered at him over being outmaneuvered. Lloyd only smirked back. Kai, meanwhile, had some idea of what just happened inside. "Maybe Coco will have some old clothes you can borrow," he said. Today was going to be exhausting. The fire ninja just knew it. Coco, unsurprisingly, was delighted to see them at her doorstep, and upon hearing why, ushered them in without a second thought. While Kai and Nia made themselves comfortable in a way that made it clear they'd been here several times before, Lloyd awkwardly wandered the apartment and studied his surroundings. The apartment was small, but cozy with an inviting lived-in feel to it. The walls had several pictures on them, mostly of either Lloyd — wow, was it weird to see himself as a teenager — or Coco at various ages, with some of friends or tapestries of calligraphy scattered about. There were also other objects scattered around that made the place feel like a home. Sticky notes with reminders and messages were stuck to the fridge, a backpack hung over a coat rack full of school books, a well-fed fish swam in a bowl on the counter, and shells of food, most of which Lloyd liked, were sitting in the kitchen cabinets, all signs of a small but happy home. Lloyd couldn't help the burn of jealousy in his gut at the sight of it. He always tried not to think about his mother. Not that he had many memories of her since she had left him at Darkley's at such a young age. The occasions he did try to remember her, he could see glasses, a green handkerchief, and a sad smile. He'd always told himself the only reason he was trying to remember was so he could avoid her if he ever saw her again. Not that he ever thought he would. She'd long made it perfectly clear she wanted nothing to do with him. All his years at that school, he'd gotten no visits, no calls, not even a postcard. His father, at least, had a reason he couldn't come for him. Being trapped in the underworld made it hard to come and visit. Still, his father has done his best to connect with him despite that, sending his shadow out to talk to him and skeletons delivering gifts on his birthdays. He'd even told him he was proud of him when the Green Ninja thing was discovered. He never doubted his father loved him, even after discovering his destiny. His mother, though, not so much. It wasn't fair. Why did other Lloyd get both a father and a mother that loved him? Even if they were apparently divorced, they still both clearly wanted him. What made his counterpart so different that he was wanted by Coco when he wasn't wanted by his own mother? What was wrong with him? Something different that caused his mother to leave him that the other Lloyd didn't have? Would Coco still want to adopt like she claimed when she discovered it too? Lloyd was pulled from his negative thoughts when Coco returned with a dusty box in her hands. "Found it," she said brightly. "We should be able to find something in here." "Why do parents keep old clothes anyway?" Lloyd asked as she beckoned him over to look. "You and Ray and Maya all had them, and they really didn't fit anymore." Coco gave him a fond smile. "Sentiment, mostly," she admitted. "Part of being a parent is wondering how your child grew up so fast. It helps to have things to remind you of when they were small. Some parents also keep them in hopes of passing them down to their grandkids someday." Lloyd made a face at the idea of ever having kids. He'd have to kiss a girl for that to happen. Yuck. To distract himself from that gross thought, he turned his attention to the box of old clothes. Much to his disappointment, he didn't see anything that looked like his own skeleton hoodie with matching cape. However, despite the lack of bone print, most of the clothes were the sort of things he would wear. He quickly grabbed some jeans and a green hoodie with a dragon on it and headed to the bathroom to change. He came back out to see Coco sitting by the box with a sad expression on her face and holding a small birdhouse in her hands. It wasn't a particularly nice birdhouse, the kind of cheap arts and crafts projects school would have made for Mother's Day presents and the like. It seemed to be made of a mishmash of various objects that didn't look like they should fit together and was sloppily painted in bright colors. In the eyes of anyone else, it would look like garbage. And yet Coco was holding it like it was precious. If there were any doubts Lloyd had over whether or not Coco loved other Lloyd, they were definitely gone now. Lloyd wasn't the only one to notice Coco's morose expression as Kai came over to wrap his arms around the woman, and Nia stood next to her in clear support. None of them had noticed Lloyd's return. "We'll get him back, Coco," Kai said resolutely. "Count on it." Coco didn't look any less worried. "Little Lloyd said there was a fire," she said. "What if he—" "It'll take more than a little fire to take Lloyd down," said Nia confidently. "Our suits are mostly fireproof, and he rescues people from fires all the time. He knows what to do." "Any trouble he finds himself in, he'll master build a way out of it," agreed Kai. "Just like he master built that birdhouse." Coco didn't look fully convinced, but she graced the two with a small smile, and gently put the birdhouse back in the box. While Lloyd did feel bad for her, the jealousy inside him burned. It took another minute or two for them to notice he'd come back. But when they did, Coco immediately brightened and said, "Everything fit all right?" Lloyd didn't respond, only holding out his arms to show that, yes, the clothes fit perfectly. Coco's smile grew. "That's great," she said, her voice fond. "You look just like our Lloyd did at your age." The words didn't really make him feel better. "Except he had better hair," Lloyd muttered sarcastically, remembering something he'd heard Nia say the day before. Nia looked utterly unapologetic. At that moment, both she and Kai's phones buzzed. "We should head back to Garmadon's facility," said Kai. "Looks like Dr. Gary wants to ask questions and do some scan thing to help him figure out the portal he's building. You coming, Coco?" "Sure," said Coco. "I'll just run Lloyd's clothes through the laundry and meet you there. Keep me informed of what's going on?" "You got it," said Kai as he herded Lloyd out the door and Nia followed behind. A few minutes later, they were all loaded onto Nia's bike and shooting down the street to the facility. Once they were gone, Coco released another sigh and regretfully packed the box back into storage, hoping to everything they wouldn't end up being the only mementos she had to remember her son by. She had to stay strong. Breaking now with Flurry wouldn't let her get Lloyd back, and it won't help little Lloyd feel welcome either. She was Lady Iron Dragon. She would endure this. She would see her son again. Coco removed the armored shoulder pads of little Lloyd's gi, placed it in the wash, and then moved to watch the breakfast dishes while she waited for it to finish. The second she turned on the tap, she shrieked as water began spraying her directly in the face. Blindly, she scrambled to turn the water off and reached for the cause. Her sink had two separate nozzles on it, one standard tap and one that could extend on a hose and shoot water more powerfully than the other. To use the second nozzle, you had to squeeze a trigger on the side, and as she looked, she saw the trigger was currently being held down by a rubber band, and the nozzle pointed right at her. Coco could only stare at the rigged sink as it dawned on her what happened. Then she burst out giggling. The great Lady Iron Dragon, blindsided by a simple prank. She would need to thank little Lloyd when she saw him later. She had really needed that laugh.